Most people know the name John Wayne Gacy. He's one of the most infamous serial killers in American history. But what most people don't know is what happened after he was caught. The science that went into figuring out who his victims actually were. Forensic anthropologists use a method called Snow's Protocol to give 24 out of 33 victims back their identity, and 9 families never got that answer at all. Snow's Protocol is a 10-step forensic method built around one idea that every skeleton has a story, and in the Gacy case, those stories were the only ways justice could be served. Gacy lived in Des Plaines, Illinois, and by all accounts seemed completely normal. He was a contractor, he threw neighborhood parties, people genuinely liked him. Nobody suspected anything was wrong. What's even more bizarre is that his confession wasn't even planned. He got drunk one night and admitted everything to a detective he considered a friend. Just casually told him what he had done. When police finally searched the property, they found 29 bodies buried in the crawl space under his house. Several more were pulled from a nearby river. The ones at the bottom of the crawl space had been there for so long that they had started melting and fusing into the ground beneath them. 33 victims total, and most of them had absolutely no identification on them whatsoever. Here's where it gets really complicated. The bodies were in terrible condition. Most were completely decomposed. Some were just bones. And because Gacy had been stacking them on top of each other for years, the remains had fused together, making it nearly impossible to tell where one person ended and another began. Normal identification methods completely failed. Fingerprints were gone. Standard dental checks only worked for some. After 6 full weeks of investigation, detectives had still identified less than half of the 33 victims. Think about what that means for families. 6 weeks had gone by. Parents didn't know if their son was one of those bodies or still out there somewhere. The uncertainty alone was devastating. That's when they brought in forensic anthropologist Dr. Clyde Snow. Snow had spent decades identifying human remains from a skeletal analysis alone, and he developed a 10-step protocol that is still taught in forensic science classes today. The idea was simple. When everything else fails, bones still tell the truth. Forensic anthropology was the only thing that could give the family a real answer. The first technique Snow used was biological profile estimation. This is the very first step in his protocol, and it's about getting the basic facts about a person purely from their skeleton. Before you can match a bone to a missing person, you need to know how old they were they male or female, how tall were they, what was their ancestry. Snow could read all of that straight from the bones. The shape of the pelvis tells you the sex. The density of the bone and the growth plates tells you the approximate age. The length of the long bones in the arms and legs tells you the height. In the Gacy case, this technique immediately narrowed the search. Most of the remains came back as white males between their mid-teens and early 20s. That matched the missing persons reports that families had already filed with police and get investigators a much smaller pool of people to work with. The second technique is dental analysis. Teeth are incredibly durable. They survive decomposition better than almost anything else in the human body. And what makes teeth so useful forensically is that every single person's dental history is completely unique to them. The shape of the roots, where the fillings are, which teeth are missing, the structure of the jaw, all of it is different from person to person. Snow's protocol uses dental analysis by comparing the teeth from the remains to old dental x-rays from the victim's dentist records. In the Gacy case, families came forward and brought in whatever dental records they had for their missing sons. Investigators compared those records to the remains and confirmed multiple identities that way. But here's the thing that really stuck with me. One victim went completely identified for 35 years, not because that technique failed, but because his dentist had thrown out his old records. Something that small, a dentist not keeping paperwork, meant that one family waited over 3 decades for an answer. The third technique is a radiographic comparison. This is where Snow's protocol gets really specific. Old injuries leave permanent marks inside bone. If you broke your arm as a kid, that healed fracture is still visible on an x-ray 10, 20, 30 years later. Surgeries leave marks. Unusual bone structure is unique to each individual person. Snow compared x-rays of the remains to old medical records from hospitals and doctors' offices to find those matches. The clearest example of this in the Gacy case is a victim named David Selma. Selma had gone missing in December of 1997 at just 19 years old. When Snow estimated his remains, he found healed fractures in the left arm. He also noticed that the left arm was slightly longer than the right arm, which is actually a sign of being left-handed, because you use that arm more and it develops slightly different over time. David Selma was left-handed. His childhood medical records showed a fracture in that exact arm. His height matched. Everything matched. The bones told his story so clearly that there was absolutely no question it was him. In the end, only 24 out of 33 families got answers. 9 victims remain unidentified to this day. their names still unknown, their families never knowing for certain what happened to them. And that's a heavy thing to sit with. But the fact that 24 identifications were made at all, in those conditions, with bodies that decompose and fuse together in the ground, shows just how powerful Snow's protocol really is. Biological profile estimation narrowed the search, dental analysis confirmed identities, radiographic comparison sealed it with the details only that specific body could tell. Together, those three techniques did what 6 weeks of normal investigation couldn't do. The bones told the truth, and that's what forensic anthropology really is at its core, giving a voice to people who can no longer speak for themselves. Snow once said that bones are the last witness. They don't forget, they don't lie, and they don't disappear. In the Gacy case, they were the only witnesses left, and because of the science behind Snow's protocol, those bones finally got to tell their story. Even decades after the fact, 24 families got closure, 9 still don't have it. And that's something forensic anthropology continues to work on through today: DNA technology and genetic genealogy.